Rebecca Goodwin is an OF model and business owner who uses the $100K a month she makes each month to support low-income families with cheap rental support. Goodwin is well known on TikTok for her commentary and raising awareness of the challenges faced by sex workers and the working class more generally in the UK. Last week, Goodwin travelled 3 hours from her home to go and do a volunteer guest appearance on the worst podcast in the UK. The podcast is called The Reality Check Podcast, and their whole thing is bringing on women who do OF modelling and mocking them. When Goodwin arrived on the podcast, this is how they introduced her.
Anyways, today we have ho number one.
Hey.
What's your name?
Wow, it's Rebecca Goodwin.
Just in case you missed that, she did a nervous laugh and he mocked her laugh. Just straight into it with the cruelty, no hesitation. And this was the attitude that they generally took throughout the podcast, telling her that she added nothing to society, that women should shave certain parts of their body, bringing up the most embarrassing stories that they could, and constantly speaking over her, like constantly. This culminated in Goodwin walking off the podcast and telling them that they were the most disrespectful people she'd ever met, and I'm inclined to agree.
Maldives or
Wait, they've seen Cornwall.
Let me finish.
We know they want to be in the UK now.
There've obviously been other places, but the plan was if they liked the motorhome.
no, but like other countries.
If, you know what? I'm gonna get off now. You lot are the most disrespectful people I've ever met.
What? We was only joking.
No, trust me. You lot are getting fucking ripped to shit now.
Are you being serious?
Yeah, I'm being dead serious.
Hey, goodbye. What the fuck?
That is mad.
What?
So the kids want to be in the UK because they're going to go to Chester, to Sheffield, to Cornwall.
Guys, do you think we did anything wrong there? Like, were we...
She was just delusional, mate.
So, was she delusional? Like, we all saw the way you were treating her, the way you were speaking to her. She kept her dignity, but she was rightfully upset, and she filmed this video on her way home.
Story time! So I've just driven 3 hours, or I've been driven 3 hours to Croydon to do a podcast, okay? Now this was an unpaid podcast. I thought I was helping people out. I was happy to come all this way with no payment whatsoever to try and, be in with the scene. And when I got there, it was 3 men in their apartment, and they sat me down. They showed me a patch of water on their sofa where they made the last guest squirt. They then decided to talk over me the whole podcast so that I couldn't say anything. They told me that I was a waste of space and I did nothing for society. I mean this with all disrespect, the reality check show, but I paid £238,000 in tax last year. What the fuck did your podcast do for society? You know what, it's really funny because one of the guys that was there is literally an OnlyFans model, and all they do is drag OnlyFans girls down to absolutely rip them to shit. Now, I am very, very lucky that someone decided to bring me here today, because I was going to come on my own, thinking it would be like a proper studio and everything, but it wasn't. It was just 3 horrible men that decided to rip me to shit and refuse to let me speak. Now, their views on women as a whole is just horrible, because as I was sat there waiting, I was a little bit late, so they said, for the next podcast girl, they said, oh, I better let this bitch know that we're going to be late. I mean, they've already been demonetized on YouTube, which I'm glad about, but I hope nobody subscribes to their new Patreon, because they are literally horrible, horrible, toxic men bringing women in. They even said they never get any views when it's men. They told me to wear a slutty outfit, and they just ripped me to shit. And now I just have to go back home. And they made me sign the model release form before, which should have been a red flag. But they've just shared me crying on Instagram to promote them. Like, I've been on so many podcasts, guys, and I can take banter, I can take a joke, but that was me sat on my own with 3 men being bullied.
It's heartbreaking to see Becky breaking down like that. And it's so interesting that they can't see what they did wrong. Like, they were actively confused when she left. Despite it being a disgusting and genuinely harrowing situation, I do want to point out, though, that she showed how intelligent and resilient she was throughout the whole thing in the face of some pretty stupid questions.
You say it's no dignity, but there's no dignity in going out to work for somebody that's really, really rich. I'm talking Tesco's, right? You're going to go, what is the dignity in setting your alarm for 6 o'clock in the morning to get up to go and make their pockets even bigger and give them more money while you're sat there all day?
You're comparing doing OnlyFans to a
Absolutely.
Even that, I'm not going to lie, even that has more dignity than what you do.
Please explain to me how getting up in the morning to line some rich
you're doing
man's
something
pocket,
positive for society, I guess.
Positive. £238,000 was my tax bill this year. Okay, I'm doing something positive for society by paying the lot of your wages.
Okay, I understand that, but what I'm saying is, if we went back to caveman times,
if we went back to caveman times, why do their arguments always start with some stupid shit like that? Yes, you might be paying enough tax to pay for like multiple NHS annual salaries and run a charity helping low-income families. But if we went back to caveman times, to which the correct answer is, shut up, nerd, you wouldn't have a fucking podcast in caveman times. Sorry, let's just hear Rebecca Goodwin's response, because it's better than mine. Go on.
Which we're not in, yeah.
We're actually going to have some constructive
if we went
production
back to
coming from people
so why
that are
don't you
doing
go
those
out
jobs.
there and kill a cow instead of shopping at Tesco's? Let's go
But
back to caveman times.
There are people doing that, though.
But
and
we're not in caveman
you wouldn't be able to
times.
eat your burgers if there weren't people doing that. Whereas you getting your minge out on OnlyFans is
I'll tell you something,
adding nothing productive to our society. If
Except
anything,
from the
it's
tax.
damaging our society.
Except from the tax bill, the £238,000 that I paid on the 31st of January
I was
this
talking
year.
about girls that are.
How is that
I was
not?
talking about if a girl was earning £1,000.
How are the NHS nurses going to get paid without these
Let's try
tax
not
bills?
talk over each other, by the way.
I was talking about the girls that are earning £1,000 a month. And comparing it to someone who works in Tesco.
These girls do not belong to society. These girls are their own girls. These girls do not have to contribute anything to society. A society that gives you what?
You could see that Becky just outclasses them on every level. She's making an appeal to the rules-y indifference principle of wealth redistribution, i.e. the least wealthy should have the easiest time with taxation because they gain the least from our current system. And then you've got caveman times over here, furrowing his brow, trying to work out what she's saying. Like this. Furrowing his brow, trying to work out what she's saying. Damien, what size rocks do you think Caveman Times and his friends should bash together on the next podcast? And what did you make of how they treated Becky Goodwin, of course?
I'm just trying to work out what the F on the side of his head means. I'm thinking F knows, because there's clearly nothing going on between his two ears. I mean, if he dragged his knuckles off the floor for 5 minutes and listened to what she had to say, she was making some pretty excellent points there. I didn't see the podcast. I'm familiar with it. It's not my cup of tea whatsoever, as you might imagine. I have seen, I'm on TikTok as well. If you're on TikTok and you haven't seen Becky Goodwin's videos come up, frankly, the girl's hilarious on TikTok. Never mind what she does on OF. She is hilarious. She's ever so funny. So you will have seen these videos come up because they have been shared to death. I mean, that video of her crying in the back of the taxi or whatever car she was in, I think it's had about 5 million views at this point. You can't help but have seen what these three idiots did to this poor woman. And it doesn't matter what she does for a living. I mean, she has 2 kids, young kids. She's only about 30 herself, I think. She needed to provide. She found a way to do that and then some. And then she's found a way to give back to society in the same way. These idiots aren't doing anything for society. They've already been demonetized from YouTube. Is that not enough of a big red flag that what you're doing and what you're saying is a bit, well, dickheadish, shall we put it? I can't help but sorry for swearing. I can't help but swear. It's so angering. It's so unnecessarily cruel what they've done to her. But as I'm sure you're going to mention, not only has she been able to buy herself a house and provide for her children, buy herself a car, she's been buying more houses from that. And she set up basically her own housing association so that people on low incomes can afford to have somewhere to live and have the dignity that she was making a big point of saying that people deserve to have. And frankly, if they haven't been taken off Patreon is beyond me as well.
Yes, I mean, hopefully that's the next thing. Hopefully they get kicked off of Patreon. The comments are all calling for us to reach out and get Becky Goodwin on here, which would be brilliant. Yeah, that would be absolutely amazing. I would love to get Becky Goodwin on here and a representative of the ECP, the English Collective of Prostitutes, which is the I think it's the biggest sex workers union in the UK. Because I think we could have a really interesting conversation about protecting sex workers and how decriminalization can help protect sex workers. I think that could be a really interesting conversation. But that's kind of beside the point of the conversation we're having right now. I thought it was telling that they thought they'd done nothing wrong. And I think that a lot of young men can learn a lesson about Manosphere podcasts from watching this, because it was a real good demonstration, I think, of how the boys were like hyping each other up. You know, they were hyping each other up and laughing with each other, blah, 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 blah. And what they were completely ignorant to, what they were completely blind to, was how intelligent the woman sitting in front of them was, how misogynistic they were being, and how consistent, consistently they overspoke her, and the effect that ultimately had on their social relationship with her, which I think it might have been genuine surprise, I think, at least from one of them, that it had gone that way. Because I think that, like a lot of young men, they thought, oh, this is just how you treat women, because that's the habit of what they get into. They get into the habit of treating women in this disgusting misogynistic way that's reinforced by other men in the manosphere, and then they're really surprised when it doesn't work. But of course, that just reinforces the message, and the message he walked out with was, oh, she's delusional. She's delusional. That's the problem. So the problem becomes, oh, it's the woman's fault. It's something the woman's done wrong, rather than some self-reflection on what actually happened. There was, you were being a dickhead, and she walked out because you were being a dickhead. You know what I mean?
There are 3 Andrew Tate wannabes. Let's be honest. That's what they're subscribing to. That's what they. That's their ethos. That's their influence. That's who has made the impression on them, and that they think they can treat women in the manner that they do, and they do it repeatedly. Apparently, from what I can gather from Becky Goodwin's responses there, that there was someone else waiting in the wings. That this is normal for them, and these are the sort of people that they have on there to belittle and run down, and they seem to get off on that. And for the life of me, I can't fathom why anybody would want to go on a podcast with 3 idiots like that who just basically get off on shaming others because they have so little going on in their own pathetic existences. It really is that simple. They've got nothing to offer society whatsoever.
If you'd come on the stream, and the first thing I did as you were being introduced was, you laughed, and then I mocked your laugh, I would expect you to walk off. I'd say she was like pretty tolerant, like really quite tolerant, to not walk off at that moment, because I think I would have been tempted to walk off. She's a better guest than I would be. I would have been a lot more. I would have like lost my temper a lot sooner.
Well, especially
like, she's so resilient.
She thought she was doing these guys a favour. She thought this was something positive that she was going on. So I question about how much she knew about the podcast in advance of giving that interview. I dare say if she knew a lot more about it, she would not have gone. She said herself she was very glad she didn't go on her own, and I think all of us are very glad that she didn't end up going on her own. But that's it was just disgusting. It was just, what else can you say to it? It was just truly vile. It was a horrible, vile thing to watch. Nobody should be treated in the manner that she was treated. And the fact that they think this is a business model that they can, monetize. They go on Patreon. Please subscribe to our Patreon so you can watch us slag off somebody else next week who doesn't deserve it. I mean, who pays for that as well? I mean, as much as I can say these 3 individuals are truly bottom-feeding, pathetic individuals who I have nothing but contempt for. The only people I could possibly have more contempt for are the fools paying them and paying for this content.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.